Hi, and welcome to the Seamless Blend, digital textile dialogues with Gabby and Jørgen. Our primary purpose is to educate and initiate discussions. The opinions expressed are solely our own and do not constitute professional advice or services. We invite contributions from our audience and maintain an open community on Discord. Hello.
Hello. Welcome to season 2, episode 9 of the Seamless Blend. DPP versus DPC, what's the difference? Essentially, we're going to be talking about acronyms all day. No, we get a lot of confusion between DPC and DPP. So that is digital product creation and digital product passports. And we're going to be looking into how they intersect, how they could support each other, and why we think it's important to talk about digital product passports in relation to digital product creation. My name is Gabby Hill. I am here with Jørgen. I am also the co-founder of Bureau 555, a digital materials agency, a researcher and academic, and also a fellow at Bath Spa University. Handing over to Jørgen.
Yeah, my name is Jørgen. I've been working with specifically textiles manufacturing and textile supply chain for the past 10 years. Focusing on technology and also specifically focusing on digital materials and digital product creation. So Gabby and I have been doing these episodes, and this season we're kind of shortening them down a little bit. The last one we did was actually a longer one. So if you want to have a deep dive into supplier-led DPC, you can listen to our previous episode. But today we're coming back to our normal kind of scheduled episode on a weekly basis. We do this little 20-minute cover of something that we think is important to talk about on a week-to-week basis. So today we're going to be talking about, as Gabby already said, DPP, DPC. There can be a little bit of confusion between the two. DPP is also becoming more and more, digital product passports are becoming more and more relevant. There is legislation around digital product passports that will be coming out over the next few years. And since we're already talking about digital product creation, DPC, and because it can be easy to confuse the two, we thought it would be important and good for us to just cover over what are some of these differences. And what do you think, Gabby? What do you feel like is the best way to kind of cover over what the differences between the two are?
Well, I think both of us have been working in digital materials for a good 3-4 years, maybe longer at this point. And I think the biggest thing that we want to address today is the disconnect between the designing of those digital materials and the use of those digital materials going into 3D garment creation and the information that's needed for the digital product passport. So I see just a really big gap between uses of the digital materials and how they could support the reporting that is needed for digital product passports. So if we roll it back slightly, just for everyone to understand, digital product passports are going to be essential on all textiles goods sold within the EU. I am calling in from London, so I'm aware I'm not in the EU, but a lot of the retailers and brands I work with will be selling in the EU. So it's very, very relevant to us as an industry in the UK. So from about January 2026, textiles products, garments manufactured will have to have digital product passports, which will have to have a scope of information on them from, we're not going to go through all of it, but like durability, reliability, reusability, end of life processing for these garments. It has to have all the information that you could make, so you can make, as a consumer, can make an educated decision about your consumer choices going forward. So that is a digital product passport. It's going to be on the garments that we buy. We will be seeing it as consumers. Digital product creation is what we do to make all of the design and development of those garments before they go into production and then when they're into production. So the digital product creation that we do is not often seen by the consumer, right? It's really the industrialized design and development process. But as designers, fabric technologists, product developers, we are sourcing material information, right? We're going to our mills, we're getting that information, we're bringing that all together, and that's when we're designing the textile and then the garment. So when we're designing the digital material, we have all of the associated information as well: composition, construction, country of origin, fabric width, and then we add in things like chemicals, water usage, carbon impact. If we can add all of that in when we are bringing in and designing for those garments, then we're capturing that information from the very beginning. And right now, and this is, I think, a little bit, Jørgen, what you want to talk about as well, is right now we're designing and developing with these digital materials, but we've got digital product passport softwares that are storming ahead saying we can deliver all of your impact information, we can do we can calculate everything for you. In no way do any of those softwares reference digital product creation, the design, the actual process that designers and developers are doing to create the products. There's a complete disconnect, and that's what's actually quite worrying to me, that we have this real opportunity to use digital materials when we create our digital product passports, and it's being very much overlooked by the industry.
It's complicated, I think, also as you've already started pointing out, because there are many technology players in this, and there are not just technology players, there are of course also consumers, where the digital product passport, let's say, should be there for the consumers to essentially serve as a little bit like, in the end, I think the way that a lot of consumers might experience digital product passports is as an extension of like a garment label in many ways. We're yet to see is like how mass consumers are going to experience digital product passports. But if, for those who are not familiar with digital product passports, can even think of it, at least conceptually right now, as right now you look at your garment and you'll find a little label, a little care label on that garment, and it will tell you very limited information about the product that you've purchased, and also maybe a little bit about how you take care of it, how you wash it, how you iron it or don't iron it, and so forth. And of course, we're looking to have a lot more data and information baked into this digital product passport, so that it's a passport, as the word it says, it's a passport for every product that comes into the European market, and it comes in with all of this information. And so it's all about then discussing where that information is coming from. And a lot of tech companies would already say that there's or tech companies that are in the, let's say, the PLM, the product lifecycle management space, they are already sitting on some of that data. You have ERP, enterprise resource planning software, they're already also sitting on a lot of that data. In DPC, which is not really a software and is more of a system to support design, development, and production, and the actual creation of a product. As you've already pointed out, Gabby, there's a lot of this information that is, and naturally, like you have to pass this data and this information through these processes as well. So while we're now seeing that there's all this legislation that is already quite disconnected from the actual industry itself, we have multiple technology players. We now have new companies coming into this, calling themselves DPP, digital product passport companies, that actually have really no connection to either PLM, ERP, DPC, kind of any one of these other things that are out there, but are now going to connect into this. I went to a seminar with someone that actually presented a digital product passport purely for the advantage of the brand of selling more and not really having anything to do with transparency, of thinking of it as this is a way for you to connect with your consumer and upsell them on many more of your products. So, but I think coming back to how DPC is really connecting into DPP here as well, and maybe even to talk, like, this is summarizing, of course, a bit of what we talked about before with DPC and the information that is captured in DPC processes. But how do you see that working, Gabby? For example, like, let's even look at fabric digitization and the 3D design workflow. Like, how could DPP really pull a lot of that information from the way DPC is working?
Yeah, I think I have to preface this with, I'm not trying to promote a utopian vision of where we all have all of the data at our fingertips when we go fabric sourcing, because I know that's not the reality for lots of the brands and the customers I work with, and it's not been my reality in the industry. But what it does require of the designer or the product developer or the fabric technologist or that person who is making the first contact with the mill is that they actually have a responsibility to request as much information as the mill can provide to them at that time. So rather than previously, maybe we would accept an article number, a weight, and the cost, right? If I'm talking about like really, really like light touch information, people are basically waiting for an article number so they can order it again or explain which one they want. They probably want some kind of like weight or composition, rough information so they can identify it, and they want the cost of it and the usable width. That's the base level of what people have been requesting previously. So it's going to put the onus on actually making more responsible and conscious decisions about the materials you are selecting, because you have to pull that data in from the mill and some mills have this data to hand and some don't. If I talk to some of my colleagues who work in mills, they will say that you're going to have a real job getting that data out of a lot of different mills, because it's not held in comprehensive Excel sheets, which can then be delivered, that are cleaned up in a good logic, that can be delivered into a lovely system. It's held within many different people's individual computers. The information isn't up to date. It's not clean and usable data right now, which that's the kind of, not to start on a down note, but that's the kind of like the reality of when people say, but we're not going to have that data at our fingertips to start with. But what it's going to, when you're doing digital product creation and you are making that first contact with the mill, it does put you in the responsible position of getting as much information as you can delivered into a system that works for you. Now, currently, if you want to design your garment in Clo and you want to use your digital material, you could request to have a digital material delivered to you. The mill might be able to give it to you, maybe the garment manufacturer will, but there's no system which brings in all of the associated data with that digital material. You can put it in the file as a JSON file, like a text-based file format. You can put it in there, but no one reads it. And I'm not trying to sort of say, well, Clo should read it, or Brownswear should read it, or Style 3D should read it. I think it should be recognised by the companies that are doing the digital product passport software, or the companies that are working within, the PLM companies or the ERP companies that are working. They should recognise that this data exists at a certain point, and it should be captured at that point. And you've got it. You might have it in the 3D softwares in the future. That would be my dream. Little plug-in, a nice bit of interoperability would be very nice. And we're only going to be able to harness that data if it's put in at the right point. And it's a painful process because we're not used to working like that. We're used to being much more swatches in books, WhatsApping your supplier, getting a hanger, designing and developing, getting the sample. It's, everyone's like, oh, but my job's really quick and all of this. I'm like, yeah, but if you don't know what you're actually ordering, is that also good?
Yeah, I like that. Or like I've been thinking a lot about this point that you also mentioned, which like related to, or even just to summarize it as quality of data, or like even like knowing, validating the data and knowing that like you have basic information or basic data, as you already pointed out, like article number, composition, construction, some basic things, the price that you're paying for it and so forth. But every fabric mill, and we've both worked on the manufacturing side, and I remember this as well, like when you work, when I worked at a fabric mill, you would have the actual fabric, and then you'll have a document that would go with every fabric that would be called a fabric technical data sheet on FTD, or like it would be called something along those lines. And if a customer wants to request that fabric technical data sheet, every customer can request that, because that's the kind of data that that comes with the product. That's quite normal. I think I would say, even outside of textiles and all the things, that you can request some kind of technical specifications about the product. That data is then usually validated, or is tested in a lab, or it's then according to certain standards and all these different things. And it then comes from the fabric mill, and this is essentially kind of signed off by the fabric mill that this is accurate and what we're going to be sharing with the customer. But what seems to be difficult for me, at least is difficult for me to understand right now, is how a lot of these DPP companies, or these new technologies that are going to be coming on top of everything that already exists, just to fill this need for digital product passports and make this easier for brand, is how these companies can now retrieve this information and actually make sure that it's validated and it's actually true and real information. And I think that that's also where DPC is coming in, or can be very helpful, because if you are a designer and you're working on a digital fabric and you're getting that digital fabric digitized, you get the appearance, the physics, you get the technical data, all this. And I think, again, I think we're both kind of calling out for a bit of it should be a universal file format that we can gather all of this together in, like, one universal digital fabric file, where you have your appearance, your physics, your metadata, and all the data would come with it. And then you can validate that information, and then it can be brought over into your 3D design tool. And then in your design tool, you'll have all the specifications of the garments and so forth. So I think that's kind of one big element to me that I'm still struggling to see how a lot of even the PLM companies, which are more almost like on the brand side and how brands are managing information, I think today struggle with validating and ensuring that the information is, first of all, that it's clean and it can be used, but of course also that it's actually true and it's validated and it's the actual information.
And also, like, just to reference the point, we are just specifically focusing on the materials right now. And obviously a garment is made up of many different components. It's got trims, it's got labels, it's got sewing thread, it has the labor that has gone into it. And it has also the air miles, the shipping, however it got from place to place as well, right? Let alone the raw materials that are in the textiles and all those things. So we are kind of like looking at one specific area, but considering that the material is sort of 98% of the garment, we can say that we can obviously gain quite a lot of information from these test reports. And the test reports are standardized, as you said. I did a piece of research. It was with our second grant, and this was around our second grant from the British Council, and it was around building trust in digital materials. And we proposed the idea of doing the fabric test report 2.0. And this was basically saying you get your standard test report, and then you just add in the tests needed to make the physical tests needed to make the digital material. And then suddenly you've got a test report 2.0. If we extend that even further and say we want a test report 3.0, then we could say we want the initial impact data that will feed into the DPP. And I think it seems so overwhelming if we look at like the 16 points that we have to hit for the eco design for sustainable product regulation. There's a lot of points. It seems very overwhelming. But if we start with the things that we know and what we can calculate at mill level, which is water usage, chemicals, presence as a substance of concern, all of these things you have to report on anyway in your test report. So you've already checked off half of them. Before we get into reusability, durability, upgradability, repairability. So the mill can provide a significant portion already. And I think we can do it starting it at a basic level and testing it out even. Because right now it feels that people have got their heads in the sand and they're too worried to even start that process, right? This is a case of, well, what are the three we can do? Start with those three. And then we'll do the fourth one, and then we'll do the fifth one. We can't do them all at one time. Wouldn't be my idea of a good time anyway.
But I think overall we're kind of maybe encouraging more people that are focusing on DPP to even look to DPC and see what kind of existing value or what kind of existing data is already coming up to the surface and exists in the workflows of DPC that could be very useful to DPP. I think that's a good place to start, because this has already been taught. While DPP is very new for many companies, DPC is also reasonably new, but it's maybe it's less new, and we've talked a lot. There's a long kind of run up to DPC and working in 3D, and DPC is of course also not just working in 3D, but it's more working in in a digital workflow, which means that you have that data. And there was one more thing that I actually thought about as you were talking about this, and I thought about like what can maybe DPP people learn from DPC. And one thing that in some of these webinars that I've been to and I've been reading about DPP and some kind of critics of DPP, and we're not really here to criticize. I'm mixing them up myself. We're not here to criticize, neither DPP or DPC. But I think one thing that's really interesting is a lot of people have brought up, at least as I've seen, that this kind of criticism around digital product passport, that consumers are not really going to engage with them. Like how many consumers actually look at the care label now when they're just boring textile care labels? How many people are even going to look at the care labels in the future, even if they're digital? Would it really be that interesting if your garment had a QR code and it just showed you very basic information? Like, it has to be quite comprehensive and it has to be interesting. And that's where I'm thinking it is almost like a bit of a live idea, but I was thinking about it could be quite interesting even that digital product passport can actually find quite a lot of value in engaging consumers in DPC. Let's say if a brand has been working in 3D, have created a digital twin of a garment, meaning that you have a physical garment, and because you've developed that, designed and developed that in 3D, you actually have a digital asset, a 3D version of that garment. Imagine if you could maybe attach that 3D version to or into your digital product passport, creating a much more engaging experience for consumers as well, where then consumers can then have a 3D version of their garment. They can see it on their phone. Maybe they can use it. This could, of course, then integrate into gaming and all sorts of online environments where you can dress up an avatar in that garment. And that really then extends the value of that digital asset that you've created in DPC to begin with. And it also then creates a more engaging experience for the consumer. When you buy a physical garment, all you want to do is almost maybe go home and scan it and add it into like an app where you can store the digital version of that and kind of have maybe your digital equivalent the garment there.
And
what do you
wardrobes
think?
And all of exactly. I think it definitely could. I think it could play into that side for sure, where it can essentially, we can sort of, for want of a better word, like optimize our wardrobes, and see usage, and also extend into other places, so digital only places for gaming. The other way I can see it engaging consumers is a slightly different way. So we're in a bit more like, if we think of fast fashion, like fast food, it's like a treat that you might want sometimes, but maybe you don't eat it every day, because it's not very good for you and it's not very good for the planet. So it's this idea of essentially your like your clothing almost having a rating app, like a food app in that sense, and it can engage you in that way as well, which some feedback from different generations is sometimes positive, because they want to hear about more stories from actually who made the clothes, where it comes from, who's being who's winning in this supply chain, in this scenario, those kind of things. And you can, it can tell different stories in different ways to promote a better sense of looking after your clothes and a better sense of understanding of where your clothes come from. So I think it can kind of go in a multitude of different ways. And essentially, I think we have become quite we've become very shielded from where our clothes and our textiles are made. And if it can open up the reality behind that, then people might be sort of like pushed in a more positive direction to make more positive choices around what they consume. I think it's a really interesting way as well.
Yeah, no, I really like. I think this is almost like, since we're giving away all of our DPP ideas here, like I think this idea,
exactly.
but like all of these ideas is really something that digital product passport should consider in terms of engaging people. Like people want to. I don't think it's just us, but I think other people also want to understand what kind of clothes do I own, and how were they made, and how, like, can I understand a little bit more as a whole of my wardrobe, what I own and how it was made and so forth. And can I actually create, like, what's the point of almost having all this digital product passports if I can take what I scan with that QR code and then maybe add it into like my app, where I then have a version of that and I can get recommendations.
Globally see where all your clothes come from, understand like literally how they interconnect with each other, understand the global stories behind these clothes. And actually that will then give you, you'll have a volition, you'll have a want to find out more. I mean,
and you can have recommendations for maybe what to wear today. If that's not really your thing in the morning to figure out, you can have an app recommended. You can see, a big picture. You can maybe, when you resell, you can then transfer it in the app to someone else. Or I think lots of opportunities where like if we bring together or build digital product passports on top of what's the work that's already been done in digital product creation and will continue to be done. It at least feels like that way. So I don't know if we created more confusion today or if we cleared it up, but I feel like
I think we've just given lots of opportunities for where digital product passports could be, how they could be used actually, but also how digital product creation is in the back end. We're doing it all to start with, right? So don't ignore all of this data. Don't overlook the value in digital product creation for digital product passports. I think that's the kind of like the main point.
Yeah. Good. That was our 20 minutes on digital product passports and digital product creation. So I hope there was something valuable in this. We'll be back again in the next week. So if anyone has any questions, then please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or somewhere else. Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Seamless Blend. If you enjoyed today's discussion, feel free to subscribe. We also invite you to connect with us and participate in our discussions on Discord. Let us know if you agree, disagree, or have any questions. Until next time, take care.